everyone, welcome back to the Insta Podcast. Here on the Insta Podcast, we strive to inspire everyone to choose the food that brings the good, as well as to dive into the nutrition and dietetics community to know more about it. I'm the host of the day, I'm Shin, and my partner here, Amin.
Hello everyone, I'm Eunmin.
Hello, okay. With such great pleasure, we have a final year dietetic students with us today. We will be sharing the third and final year experience and give us some tips and tricks to overcome the upcoming challenges. Hello, Kah Yen.
Hi guys. Hi guys. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for accepting our invite.
Okay, so before we jump right into the section, would you like to give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Okay, so I think again, just thank you guys for having me today. So a little bit about me. My name is Kah Yen. I'm a final year dietetics student from DM118. So like I think some of you, my decision to pursue dietetics centered around like a personal experience. So I think I'll just keep a long story short. I actually had body dysmorphia growing up. So that eventually led to me having an eating disorder. So obviously, had to go through it. And I think after going through it and now like being a little bit better with myself and also my relationship with food, I think that itself has inspired me to sort of want to be that person, that qualified person to help others, because I essentially did not have someone there to help me. So that was basically what it was. And I wanted to help people who were struggling in sort of the same situation that I was struggling with. Yeah, this is just like same shameless self-promotion here. But I like to kickstart that. I've actually started like this Instagram page. It's still quite small, because it's quite new. It's called Nutri-Taji. So if anyone listening, you're interested to, follow me, or also any of your seniors who are doing the same thing, feel free to look around. For mine, it's Nutri-Taji, which is at Nutri, Nutri .Taji, TEGY.
So from the name Nutri-Taji, I guess you're going to do something that can provide nutrition-related information and maybe some strategies for the community and maybe for them to know how to eat healthy, right?
Yep. I think it's mostly focusing on the community, and we a lot of our core values are more to like sustainability. So giving people strategies that could not just solve the problem right there and then, but also something they can take and also apply in their lives for the long run.
Mm-hmm. I personally love these kind of Instagram accounts that break those myths online. Like there's so many diets out there, like cabbage diet, celery diet, and it's just so misleading for so many people. And it's really good to have all these accounts out there. And yeah, I really follow like a lot of them, and I love seeing all the content.
Also, like in general, we won't go and see the addition if we have nothing health issue, right? So where do we get this kind of information? It's impossible. We go to search like government website. There was like more impossible things to do. So
I think when you search, also a lot of things might come up as well that is probably not very reliable. So I think having someone with a nutrition background like us sharing the information, that's a little bit better, I think, for the community as well.
So without further ado, let's get into the topic today.
Okay, so as a second year student, when we first came into IMU, we were like so fresh, and it was still in the midst of the earlier stage of the pandemic. And we're like, oh yeah, year 3 and 4 are so far away. Like, when are we ever gonna reach it? And then fast forward now, we're already in our second semester of year 2. So it's getting more and more surreal. Like, did you feel more stress in year 3 and 4 compared to the first 2 years, or vice versa, or something?
Weirdly enough, my hardest semester was actually semester 1, and also semester 4. For semester 1, I would say, I guess it's the whole, transitioning from pre-U to undergraduate. It's similar to like when you go from SPM to university setting. It's vastly different. I think from foundation to undergraduate, it's not so different in the sense that it's a different environment, because I did my foundation in IMU itself. But I think at the time, there was like a lot of pressure on myself and expectation as well to do well, because, like carrying that momentum from foundation into undergraduate, I try to be more active in the extracurricular. And I think from there, my stress level, it went up. I essentially like had a lot of pieces of myself like in different places, and I had to juggle everything, on top of like your assignments, your tests. And sometimes they like to put deadlines like even like one shot. So that's probably, I think, what made it a little bit harder than I would expect it to be. And then for semester four, a lot of it I think centered around the pandemic. It was MCO. We suddenly had to go full online, and as someone who traditionally preferred, physically doing things, I think that in itself definitely made it harder to cope.
That's very interesting because it's just so cool to see how different your experience was from us. We started sem one just straight online. So I would say it wasn't stressful at all because it was like kind of too chill.
Okay, I mean, like, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about where the stress comes from. Year 3, the research year. So for the timing, like you mentioned just now, I guess you are all doing the 3rd year online, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So how was the experience doing online in year 3? Because you're going to conduct the research online. Tell us your experience on that.
I think with like everything, like, there's like good and bad. So like previously, just now I said like a lot of the reason why I felt semester four onwards was harder because of online learning. I think I myself, have adapted to the situation. I sort of got the hang of things, how things work and how things are. So I think scheduling and also the way I handle myself with work and everything was easier. I found it a little bit more efficient actually because, I don't have to physically go to class and everything. But for research wise, it's definitely something that, brought on a challenge because when we talk about research, it's traditionally conducted physically. All your lecturers, they are also more familiar with having research done in person, whether you talk about like giving out questionnaires or whether you talk about like doing physical anthropometry measurements. It's all physical stuff. So for me, I would say, we try to make it online at first as well because we sort of foresee the MCO happening. But even then, there were certain things like details in the research itself that we had to change just so that the data that we collected were more accurate and reflected onto what we want it to be. So, I would say one advantage of online is that you can record your sessions. So if you forget anything, you just go back and you rewatch. So that's something I found to be very useful because I have very short-term memory and sometimes I zone out.
Same.
So having
Same,
the ability
definitely.
to rewind things is like, such a godsend feature that like Microsoft Teams has given us. Going to lecturers wise, like with your supervisors and stuff, I would say meetings I think would be more efficient as well because you can do it anywhere. You don't have to say I need to book that room, is that room available at that time. Sometimes if you talk about face-to-face classes, you have to do it very late and I don't think all of us have the energy to do very late meetings. However, that also there's like also a disclaimer that goes into that because I think when you do things online, you no longer have like a work limit. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with meeting after hours, but I think sometimes it really drags on. And when you do it consistently, I think it can affect your mental health as well, especially if you're someone who like de-stress, do your own things at night. And when you take that away, that could affect you as well.
Like there's no line between school and home
Yes.
anymore because everything's
like
done
the
at
boundary is
home.
kind of like fuzzed out.
Yes, the line is blurry.
I think
Yeah.
that like to some extent, right, it's quite lucky to have half experience in physical and half experience for online. Because no matter how we have to adapt to this situation, it's like everything now is doing online, even though now it's still extending, not like really
Happening.
extending, but it's online
With
mode,
SOP.
everything.
Yes. Speaking of research, the most important part of research is literature review, which is reading a lot of papers. So what are some reliable resources or website you would recommend for us to go for?
For me, obviously, when you go to IMU, I think IMU, this is one thing that's quite good about IMU is that they actually schedule this session within your timetable itself. I'm not sure if you guys have had it yet. Probably soon. If not,
I think
you
we
probably
have,
will
yeah.
have it. It's that one session with that librarian man. He's a reference librarian and he's very fast paced, but he's I would say he's very helpful when it comes to this kind of things, because he essentially tells you all the things that you need to know when it comes to finding things that you need for your research, and even going down to like the citations and everything, which, not many people will help you with, but like, thank God that he actually helped me with that. So obviously, IMU Library Portal is one of the things that I think all of us can use for research. So this includes like the EDS search, where you type in all your keywords pertaining to your research or something that you're curious about, and that's where all the articles that IMU is subscribed to or have access to will come up. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is quite the obvious thing, we all go to Google. So I'm not saying Google itself, but there's like a more academic version of Google, which is Google Scholar. That's something I think everyone can go for, because you will realize when you compare the searches on the IMU library and Google, sometimes when IMU doesn't have access to certain articles, they may have it on Google Scholar itself. So the next one, I think when it comes to talking about reliability and everything, obviously when it comes to searching up all these resources, as I mentioned, some of them, like, they're super old. They're like 1998. Pretty sure all your lecturers have told you it's only within 5 to 10 years that you're allowed to search. And obviously for us, we're like, there's only so much that has been published within these 10 years. It's definitely something that is challenging on our side. And I found that to be quite a challenge as well. Sometimes you can use some of these older articles, but obviously looking at the credibility is very important. So I think one thing that the lecturers have told us about is obviously look at the authors and their credentials. So this means that, if you're talking about a paper on nutrition management for like obesity, so are the authors who are writing the papers, really people involved with obesity management, or like doctors, or maybe dietitians, or are they just people that have no affiliation with obesity or even nutrition itself? So that's where you can kind of determine whether the article is written from like a person who's legit, or a person who may not know really well the topic that they're researching on. And also when it comes to bias, this is something that I think it's a very common word when we talk about research. So bias can happen a lot when the paper or the authors itself are funded by a company. So they will sort of report things that the company itself would want. So for instance, if I'm a corporate company, I have a product and I'm doing a research on it, if I fund the research, it's essentially, there's like this room of like, there's this really weird area where people will think like, oh, are the results, if the results are good, fabricated, or are they just saying that the thing is good because the company itself are the main source of funds for the research itself? That's one thing. And then the next thing is probably looking at the references, like it's the same thing, references, checking if the references, if it's related, if that one sentence is talking about, like the one sentence you want to pluck out is talking about like hypocaloric diets are good for obesity. Like if the source is something that is not related to it, obviously it's probably not legit. So that's one thing. And I think final thing, as I mentioned just now, if whether it's up to date, or how old has the paper been. And also sometimes within the papers, like let's say you take something 2012, but then the reference within the paper itself is like 1990 something. So that's probably also something for everyone to consider, whether that up-to-date factor is in that paper or not.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there are so many factors to take into account when doing research. It's really up to your own judgment. You have to look at the authors, the credibility, the date, the references. So the advice is just to look through everything and be thorough about it. There's no single hack that like helps you find like the best article.
I think that there's also this thing where you can also ask the lecturers for their opinions on like which one they would prefer, because certain journals, they publish certain things like very specific to nutrition things, or certain journals that just publish like all types of research background, whether it's nutrition, engineering, and things like that. So maybe if you want something more specific, you can ask your lecturer for opinions, or ask them like where do they want you guys to sort of go.
Yeah, when in doubt, just email your lecturers or Teams message them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, the librarian briefing that
Yep.
I put in our schedule. Yes, I think that is really helpful. Because when I saw that in my schedule, I was like, oh, another briefing. But I
Yeah.
went and I was like, whoa, this is really informational. I wouldn't even learn this if I didn't go. Yeah, I really like how he teaches how to access all these different sources and how he teaches how to cite things. Like I'm uses Vancouver citation,
Yep.
and I have been citing things wrong my entire first year until he taught me how to do it properly my second year. And I was so relieved after I learned. So definitely don't miss out those sessions.
I think sometimes we take that session for granted, because I think I definitely did, because at first, like you said, you have it every semester, and I remember telling myself, I like, why can't they just make it like once? It's like, oh, I could like use my time to do so many more things.
Yes.
But I think he probably knows students very well. We have the shortest memory ever, and anything that we have from one sem, we don't retain it to the next sem. So he does it every sem just to kind of tell us like, yeah, I kind of know how you guys are, so I'm just helping you guys, and then you'll
Yeah, shout out
appreciate
to
me at
him.
the end.
Yeah, shout out to Mr. Rasman.
Can I have an idea like how many paper you guys need to go through when doing a research?
Again, it's very dependent on your research topic. If it's a very, I think, new research topic, obviously you're not going to get much sources. So from that, maybe you could say you're at a disadvantage because you don't have a lot of things to support your research itself. But at the same time, you don't have to read so much. But like there's like give and take to like the situation. But when you talk about like more well-known topics like diabetes and things like that, obviously you search, there's like tens and thousands of things that comes out. So for us, I remember reading up to like 200 papers, but like obviously if you ask your seniors, they will say like you don't have to read the whole paper, because sometimes you really don't have time on your side to have the luxury of skimming through word by word, looking at what the researchers did and what results they obtained, whether it supports your paper or not. I mean, like it's like obvious, like if you read the abstract and then you see like, oh, it's not something remotely even related to my research, so I can just take the article away and just move on, save time, go to something else that may be more helpful for my research.
So like just what Kaya mentioned, so many literature review you need to go through. Like how do you manage your time to read the literature while juggling so many other modules and activities?
For me, like I tend to dedicate like different times of the day to do different things. So because I'm essentially a person, if I start something, I really need to do it to the end. Or if I keep like stopping in between, my momentum gets lost, and then I'll just feel like kind of blare about it. Like, oh, I don't feel this assignment. I don't want to do it, because that dynamic of like wanting to do it, it's not there. So what I would do is I try to push everything to the end of the day, not so late that like it's at 11, but it's like mostly after dinner. That's when I usually do it. I'll start and I'll probably spend like I spend like as long as like 4 hours up. But I think when you guys start doing it, maybe you can try like doing like 2 hours just dedicated to doing your research work. I think what really saves my time is just understanding your research very well. That's probably something that is quite difficult when you're starting with research. I think for all of us, even me, when I started, I'm like, I don't know what I want to know, and I don't know what I don't want to know, that kind of a situation. So, that's where like obviously it goes back to your supervisors, asking them, understanding what your research is about. And from there, just kind of think of certain things that you yourself, because you're fairly new to the topic, what you would want to know. And that's where you start searching. So my research was on children's food preference, and it's not my first choice. So obviously I was thinking like, oh, like I don't really know what I want to know. I don't really know like what do I look for. So I just started with like a simple search, like food children, gosh, children and food preference. So from there I sort of saw like what was being done already, and I was thinking, what can I add to these? So that's where you kind of narrow down the scope of your literature review to just that. Instead of searching like food or like food preference, you can search like more specific food preference in children. That's something that I think is very important. Just try to be as specific as possible when it comes to your literature review, so that it really gets to the point rather than, having like this big ocean of information and you just like one by one slowly skim through everything, which is going to take up your time unnecessarily.
Yeah, I think one good point that you mentioned just now is understand your subject. Because not only doing research, I think study also. If you're going to do for a test, right, you're going to understand your subject very well. You're going to understand what the test will come out, like SAQ or MCQ, then you find the right way to do the right thing. Then you can save the time. So from your perspective, are research math important in the research studies?
I would say it's definitely important. I think because, like I mentioned just now, when you're having research, it's something very new, and it's like being thrown into like a ball pit and people expecting you to do gymnastics. Like you obviously can't do that. You need the help, like someone to train me, like how do I stretch? How do I do this thing? It's sort of similar to that. And I think having research group mates, I think really definitely helped me a lot because imagine if you're like a solo person having to do something, obviously I think mental health wise, if you make like certain mistakes, if you're like me, I tend to beat myself up over it. But when I have like a research like group mate there, at least, we're sort of like a support network for each other. If they make mistakes, you can, like tell them, hey, it's fine. Essentially make yourself feel a little bit better about the situation because, you're both new. And I think that's a very important aspect of a research partner, I would say.
Yeah, but sometimes things we can't expect. How we deal with a group mate that is not cooperative, like not what you mentioned just now, they're so good, like so helpful, can support each other. Yeah, have you faced this kind of problem before?
I think in the past, definitely yes. For research wise, I would say not so much, but I think it's definitely something very normal that everyone experience. So I think when it comes to talking about uncooperative group mates, I think one thing that's very important, and this is something that I do, which could be good and could be bad, depending on again your schedule and also the type of person that you are. But for me, I would, try to look around and see like whether if anyone is up for being like the group leader. And then if not, then I'll just, volunteer to be the group leader. And I think from there, I can sort of keep track of everything that's happening itself. So this is basically like, you take the lead into ensuring whether everyone has gotten their part done or not. And I think as a subset to that, this is just something that I did, which I actually didn't realize it helped the situation itself. So it's essentially, within I'm pretty sure every group, you have a group WhatsApp chat. So I would write down like, oh, today's task, this task, like subtask A, subtask B, and then like the person who has to complete it. So I'm like, oh, when you're done, put a tick. So at least like from that, like even myself, when I see like my group mates like filling out the ticks, I'm like, oh, I need to get it done really quickly, and get my shit done. So that like at least you don't feel like you're dragging the team down, and it makes you, I think, more, I guess, aware of your role in the group itself, rather than, sometimes we also tend to forget that we have that thing going on. And I think that's sort of a good reminder to anyone who may be uncooperative within the group itself. That's one thing. And I think to supplement that, I would say obviously get a timeline of when you want to get things done, just so that everyone in the group has an idea of what is expected of the assignment itself. If you say we need to get the draft done by this week and then send it to the lecturer by next week, then they cannot come and say like, oh, I didn't know about this, because it's already on like a timeline or a Gantt chart that you guys have created for the group itself. So that's one thing. And also when you have like these timeline itself, you can actually, like for me, because I put buffer times in between like each deadline, it kind of helps you just to make sure like, oh, if I get any like work that doesn't really meet your expectation or the quality that the group has set for the assignment itself, then you can kind of go back and say like, okay, maybe you guys can fix these few things, and then we'll move forward to either submission or, giving to the lecturer for review.
Wow, sounds like you've had your fair share of uncooperative teammates.
I mean, got a few lah, but not assignments lah. I think events lah, like a few lah. But it happens lah.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the task and adding like a tick at the end.
Oh, there was pressure that everyone will go. Yeah.
it's a very
I
good
mean,
tool
it's
for
not in a
team
bad way, lah.
leaders.
Like, don't want to purposely pressure people, but then it's like, I think if you're the group leader, it's easier for you to see also, lah. Like,
Yes.
you know, what has been done and
Yes.
what has not.
I think it's peer pressure in a good way. It keeps everyone accountable. Yeah, I really like that hack. I'm gonna
Hopefully.
use it. I'm gonna use it.
I think we most like cover up everything, every tips and trick that we want to get from Kah Yen from
Wow,
year
I'm
three.
learning a lot.
Yes, yes. We're so lucky to have this conversation before we moving
Yes.
forward to Sem 5. Okay, so any suggestions or method that you think are very important to manage well in the research?
Okay, I mean, for me, I'm thinking of like mostly time management because I think that's one of the biggest challenge that anyone will have. And I know like time management, when they say time management, right, they say like, oh, it's something that people always bring up. Like it's like the most abuden answer, like the most
Yes.
obvious thing that you can think of, like, oh yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Obviously, I need to manage my time well to do well. But when you go into like actually executing everything, you realize like, oh, it's maybe not that abuden. It's actually very hard. I am actually not coping well with time management. So, you know, time management is the first very important thing when I think it comes to research. Everything relies on your time because I don't know if you guys will have the same situation as we did. I hope not. But for us, when we had to do our like thesis presentation, our thesis submission, it kind of coincided with a lot of deadlines and tests. So obviously we were very stressed and we were all rushing to get things done. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'll just be honest here. Like some of us, we actually didn't sleep for one whole night just to get this whole thing done, which is very sad. Like, you know, we want to practice what we preach, but sometimes when it comes to having to get things done, you kind of have to force yourself to do it. But I obviously don't recommend this to anyone who's listening, which is why I stress on time management a lot when it comes to research. So like first and foremost, have a timeline. I think the lectures will help you with this as well. And I think at the start, you might think like, oh, is this something that has to be there? It's not something I'll use. Now, that's what I thought. But I think when you actually started executing your research and started having to really get things moving, that's when you realize how important your Gantt chart is for your deadlines and also how it helps with your general how you manage all the work within that semester itself. So besides having just your research Gantt chart, I would say you try to incorporate your research Gantt chart or timeline into your own schedule so that you can make sure that everything flows as well as possible and nothing really clashes so much that you have to end up burning midnight oils like all your seniors did. That's one thing. And I think as a subset to time management itself, I think I've mentioned this quite a few times before, is to just understand your research very well, which I would say could be difficult for all of us when we first starting. You know, even me now having done research, if you ask me to do another one, I'll probably have a hard time because I'm just like, my strength and energy is all gone, all drained out of me. Having to repeat it again is probably difficult. But I would say understanding it is important because it's the basis of your research. If you don't understand where your research is supposed to go or what your research is even, then you have to spend more time answering those questions before you actually get down to doing your research itself. So I think in that case, you know, try to find a topic that really matches your interests. And from there, it helps you a little bit more in terms of that understanding part. You know, you kind of cut down a little bit on that. And from there, you save more time to do other things within that research component of your semester itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for your valuable tips.
I never thought like you guys would really non-sleep. Yeah. I thought this thing wouldn't happen in
I mean, we
end.
procrastinated a lot also. Some of us, we procrastinated. But, you know, don't do that. But if it happens, you know, like, just be ready to have to experience those like nights of not sleeping, checking your phone, and then seeing your friends also not sleeping.
Yeah, time management is such an easy thing such an easy advice to give, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of practice, it's
hard.
certainly not easy.
You know, got phone, everything become not easy. Got social media, everything become not easy
Yeah,
already.
there's too many distractions these days.
Yeah, yes, agree.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what's your biggest obstacle in your research year?
I think like what I said just now, time management, which is why I kept stressing about it, because for my case itself, I would say time was not on my side when it came to research because I had struggles getting participants. It dragged on my time. I had struggles interviewing my participants, dragged on my time even more. And because my research, we had to transcribe each interview that is like an hour long. So imagine having to listen to like the interview recording, type out everything, like all the ums, ahs, that's how transcription works. So I think that ended up pushing a lot of things I had to do to like the back end. And then when I had to do it again, I realized, oh, I have this other thing to do. I have this other thing to do. So that whole thing kind of made me like I remember just like typing my thesis out and be like, I have really regret not starting earlier and all those things, even though I know like some of them cannot be helped, like the participants kind of thing. But if it's possible, like I mentioned just now, set timelines in case anything that you don't expect comes up, then like where you can push your timeline, where you can push certain dates to. And if you can have buffer periods, that's also very great. So that these buffer periods are just days where, in case shit goes down, then at least you have a day where you can put those things at, and then it doesn't affect your overall schedule as well. But for me, I think because of that time management issue itself, it kind of really affected, I would say, my mental health. It's not the worst that it has been. Like, I've had like more stressful times, but it goes back to like, oh, I don't have time to spend with my family. I can't go out on weekends because I need to write my thesis. And as someone who really values going out with my parents and also hanging out with my friends, whenever I have to reject them, I get very guilty. And it feels like, oh, I don't want to say no, but if I don't say no, then I know I will struggle a lot to get things complete. So it's like really true. You have to start like making sacrifices, either your personal time with your family and everything, to just do your work and get it done, which I think for some people can be quite difficult. So like I said, it took a toll on like my physical health because I wasn't working out when I was doing my thesis, and it made me feel really bad. I was like so sluggish. It affected my mental health and it also affected my emotional health. Yeah, that's another thing. Get ready to, I like, this is probably not a good thing to say, but really be open to crying and breaking down.
Yeah, be mentally prepared.
Yes, yes. I think a lot of your seniors would have told you like, I think especially like now final year students, we're all like mentally preparing ourselves and just waiting. Like it's not if it will happen, it's when it will happen. That's the whole premise of like, the emotional stress that this thing can take on you. So yeah, I would say it's kind of hard to really go around it because it is dealing with your personal things. It is your own mental health. So if it helps, go find a counselor. I think we have great counselors. I have friends who have spoken to them. And if you feel like you need to talk to them, by all means, go for it. But if you feel like you don't want to talk to a stranger, like you're not comfortable, you can also go to your friends. I do that a lot. I call my friends at like 1 a.m. and be like, hey, I need to talk. Let everything out, whatever makes you feel better about the situation and helps you cope a little bit better, go for it. But obviously don't do drugs and all those things because like, don't cope like that. But yeah, if you need to let out your emotions, definitely find someone who can help you do that.
Yeah, definitely letting it out is definitely a good release.
Yeah.
And it helps you move forward. Like, okay, just get this shit over. I'm gonna
Yes.
cry it out and then just get this shit done. Let's go.
So here is the end of today's episode. And once again, thanks to Kah Yen here to be the special guest for this podcast. And we really learned a lot from you. Hopefully by the end of this episode, you guys have learned more about what dietetic students do in their research year and placement year. Probably get some tips and mentally prepare for the upcoming challenges.
Yes, thank you so much, Kah Yen, for sharing so many valuable tips with us today. And before signing off, do check us out on our Instagram at insa.imu, which is indsa.imu, and our podcast at Insa Podcast.
And also do check out on Kah Yen Kickstart Aspiration Instagram account NutriTegi, NUTRI.TEGY. This is Insa Podcast, inspiring everyone to choose the food that brings the good. I'm Hui Shin.
I'm Amin. Stay tuned for the future episode. Bye!